Good day. I'm Andrew Fain, and I'll be discussing political polarization in daily life. Well, political polarization is a serious issue in the United States, one that many would assert is a growing issue, which is something we will touch on, though it is not a primary topic of this speech. And so, political polarization does affect people in daily life, and we will be discussing the ways that it does that. Mainly how people live, the living locations, the partner selection, friend and partner selection, and statistics, how people see and interpret statistics and basic facts. And first, understand how these things come into play. We have to understand political polarization itself, what it means, which is essentially the extent of how the extreme people are willing, the extent that they're willing to go through to preserve their own ideologies and push away differing opinions and allowing those not to spread, generally speaking. Now, this is mostly seen among the politicians, and this is one of the pushes for why polarization, or to insist that polarization is an increasing issue, though Morris Fariona, in her article, Americans Have Not Become More Politically Polarized, does suggest that this is not the case, and that polarization itself is not increasing, but rather just the ones who are polarized are becoming more grouped together. There are the liberals used to be both Democrat and Republican, but now they tend to lean more Democrat, much more Democrat than they had previously, and the same with conservatives. They follow the same trend. So they tend to keep more into groupings as opposed to disperse among many. So if there were an increase in polarization, then we'd likely see a decrease in moderates, though that just has not been the case. So now that we do understand the difference between growing polarization and general polarization, we can begin to distinguish what this is actually causing. One of the big things that it is when people move, there's a high homophily, which means that people move to locations that they agree with, that have ideologies they agree with. And they found that in research done in an article, Migration and Political Polarization in the U.S., an analysis of county-level migration network, they found that many people who are already politically driven or very politically driven and active will have a high homophily, as opposed to moderates who have a very low to no homophily based on where they move. They just go wherever is most convenient, not what is most politically similar. And so this really does feed into the friends, because people who are willing to move somewhere that shares their opinions are also more likely to choose friends that they agree with, that they share the same or similar ideologies with. In fact, 60% of conservatives and 49% of liberals would say that they have friends that agree with their opinions. Ryan Lamont states that this calls these theopolitical enclaves, and these enclaves are basically just groups of people who get together and they feed off of each other and increase their own ideologies while pushing out other ideologies that they may not agree with, which is fed into by Carol Cadwallard, who in her article Google Democracy and the Truth About Internet Search, says that, and I quote, "The internet scripts enables data mining and influence companies like Cambridge Analytica to precisely target individuals to follow them around the web and to send them highly personalized political messages. This is a propaganda machine." So she's saying that the internet is basically feeding into these enclaves who are the main concern of this problem. The internet is feeding into them, and it's helping breed these kinds of ideologies because they're not getting any, because of the enclaves, they're shutting themselves off from the rest of society. So they're not, or so to speak anyway, and so they're not letting in these new ideas, and the internet caters to this sort of closed-mindedness, if you will. And so they hold these enclaves, theopolitical enclaves, that they don't move from, as opposed to moderates who are much more open, and only about 25% of them say they tend to keep with friends who agree with them politically. And so this is these are things that you can take into account for on a personal level, though there is one factor, how people analyze statistics and facts, that does come at a more subconscious level, because when they did some research from Pew Research, and especially from this one paper by Benjamin Boyer and Joseph Cabanor, they said that in their article Facing Facts in an Era of Political Polarization, Young People's Learning and Knowledge about Economic Inequality, they found that 81% of the people surveyed disagreed about policy. This is right before the 2016 election, about policy, president, and even what facts relate to those issues and how those facts were interpreted. And so this makes it difficult to take facts objectively, because now we can't agree on what is objective. And this is obviously problematic in a day-to-day manner, especially if you want to look at something like the economy, which is numbers, but if your political bias may have an influence on how you perceive those factors. Overall, political polarization has a very heavy influence on day-to-day life, and not just on a political basis. So as long as people have the freedom of thought and ability to share ideas or even push away ideas, this trend will continue to take place, and there will be nothing to do about it in a free society. Thank you, and please have a nice day.